creatures and removal spells are at the curb. The Esper Human deck is clearly more tribal oriented, playing you have Sky Knight and Cartel Aristocrat, Daring Skyjack, all humans. The only tribal payout in this deck is Zathra Necromancer, which is really popular, and we actually saw the Boros human decks move to more of an Orzhov human shell to incorporate the Necromancer.
Thoughtseize is on the stack, my friends. You've got a Leo Sky Knight. You have a Detention Sphere. There's a Last Breath, a Cartel Aristocrat, and a Watery Grave. So the necessary mana to cast the spells needs a few more lands. I mean, he has the necessary colors, excuse me, but he needs another land to be able to cast all of the spells in his hand. Does Bernie, but he's off to a good start here with a Soldier.
Yeah, and I would expect Joe here to take Cartel Aristocrat since Joe can't, Bernie rather can't cast the other cards in his hand as currently constituted, and two of them in Last Breath and Detention Sphere not very efficient against what Joe's going to be up to. So.
Well, there goes the Aristocrat. Bernie will draw his card for the turn. Couldn't quite make out what it was. But as we talk about this Esper Humans deck, this is a deck that, if you want to find out more information about it, I know Sam Black played it in his latest video on the premium side of Star City Games. And we've also seen BBD and CVM actually play it in a Versus video as well. So it's this really obscure deck that when you look at it on paper, you're just thinking, okay, what the heck's going on here? It doesn't make any sense. But second place in a Grand Prix with a deck that no one really saw coming, can't really be so bad.
Well, I honestly think of the cards that are, when we talk about what are the best cards that no one's playing right now, I've been saying for a little while, very high on my list, possibly number one has been Obsidat. Card's really, really good. It clearly competes in the same decks and mana slot as Blood Baron, and Blood Baron is very good against white aggro decks and mono black, which have been prevalent, but when you're backing it up, when you're taxing your opponent's removal with all these little creatures, Obsidat can be stuck on an empty board, and it's incredibly powerful once you get to that place.
The new draw step with Zathra Necromancer is Bernal's going to Thoughtseize that away. So again, Last Breath, Attention Sphere, and Yev Sky Knight, are in the grip here for Bernie. So what he's looking for right now is a third land, but Bernal is at 12. Now he's going to go down. Excuse me, he was at 10. He was at 14. He was going to go down to 12. Two Thoughtseizes, 2 hits. Going to put him at 12. And Bernie didn't draw a land, but he drew something about as good.
About the best draw on the deck right there during Skyjack.
Bernal going to cast a Hero's Downfall in the main phase. Excuse me. Now, part of the reason for that is, does this deck have Brave the Elements hiding out in it?
It does not.
Yeah, most of the white decks do.
Yes. If Joe is familiar with this list, then he may know that that's not a thing, but there's really no reason to untap and allow Bernie to untap and risk it if he's just going to cast Hero's Downfall anyway. But with Zathra Necromancer and Desecration Demon, really too many of the white creatures have been removed from the deck to make room for a card like Brave the Elements.
Attack for 2 here from Bernie, going to put Bernal down to 10. And Bernal will draw his card. There's a Swamp, so he does have 4 lands. Kind of that flashpoint where Desecration Demon and some other things start to come into play. Underworld Connections plus draw a card, things of that nature. You see a Hero's Downfall there in Bernal's hand. Now we saw him play around a Brave the Elements before, but he doesn't do that this go around.
He may be saving his removal spells for the Sky Knight that he knows about, because he has a Grey Merchant in his hand, which then covers the Soldier.
So Joe's going to go down to 8. Now here's an Imposing Sovereign past the turn back. So we'll probably see Joe pull the trigger on a removal spell down. There goes the Imposing Sovereign via the Hero's Downfall. We're now going to untap. He'll take a draw step here. There's a third Thoughtseize. Not sure if he's going to actually need that right now. I think deploying a Grey Merchant is kind of boring as it is. It's actually pretty good here.
2/4s are fine against 2/1s.
Yeah. There is a Pack Rat, I think, in Bernal's hand. I believe that he can also deploy at this point. He can do the old play a Pack Rat, activate it the same turn, which is obviously quite powerful in this situation.
Obsidat the draw for Bernie. A little ways away from being able to cast that.
I don't know if we get to that point, it could be quite good. The Detention Sphere in Bernie's hand is going to do a nice job of taking care of that rat. So,
and this is what I was talking about before. There's so many. Look at Bernie's graveyard, all those little creatures. Deck's very good at taxing the removal, obviously, and Obsidat's main weakness is that it's susceptible just to random pinpoint removal. Once you wear that all out,
Sky Knight's going to come into play. It's going to target Pack Rat. You see that Bernal's going to activate his Pack Rat, discarding the Thoughtseize that he's not going to need now to make another Pack Rat here.
He's going to pass it back again. with Bernie having access to Detention Sphere, he's not going to trade a Soldier of the Pantheon right here.
And now there is a Gray Merchant. So Gray Merchant is going to be for 4. Of course, the Pack Rat tokens do have Devotion in their mana cost. Now the Pack Rat's actually going to come into the red zone here. So we'll see when untap here. He'll take a draw. Again, he does have the Detention Sphere in the grip. I think he has a second copy now.
He just picked up another one.
Yep. I think it's probably worth it. So he's going to attack for 3, put Bernal down to 9. Do you like just desparing the rats?
Yeah, might as well.
You see the replacement there of the rat, but this is going to take care of both of those. So bye-bye that. So now you've got a Gray Merchant kind of holding down the fort against a Soldier. Well, Wen sitting at 14, Bernal sitting at 9. There's a Pharika's Cure. That's actually a pretty good draw. Going to take care of the Sky Knight. Might see Bernal go on the offensive, or do we just want to play a little draw-go game?
I think Joe's draws are so much more powerful on average than Bernie's draws that Joe should just probably sit back on D.
Okay. Gwen draws a land. He's getting closer to Obsidat now.
And yeah, Godless Shrine critically, so now he
Yeah.
has both double black and double white accounted for. I think this is not an unreasonable spot to Last Breath if you're Bernie.
Clear that out of the way, lower the devotion count. Yes, your opponent goes up to 15. You attack for 2, go down to 13.
But that Last Breath, what else is it going to do?
Yeah, I guess, it's really not getting that much better. You're not really too worried about a card like Nightfield Spectre. A Soldier's going to come across, so he's going to gain 2 in the exchange. Godless Shrine going to come and play tapped and pass the turn. Yeah, I can certainly see a reason to do that. Whip of Erebos the draw. Not bad.
So what does Joe have in the graveyard at this point?
You see, he's going to take a look.
Nothing.
Nothing. Pack Rat's underneath the sphere, Last Breath Exile, so actual nothing. All right, so one's going to come across for 2. It's going to put Bernal back down to that 11 life total that he was at before Last Breath. Here's a Cartel Aristocrat passing the turn back here. So Wen is in the enviable situation here of if he draws a land or a spell, all his draw steps are live.
Right.
Which is great. Bernal just draws another swamp, so he has a swamp in his hand.
And Bernie with a lot of exile removal between Detention Sphere and Last Breath, which is very good against the whip.
Take a draw step here. Did Bernie
a whip of
his own?
A much more powerful whip.
Yeah, I would say so. So he's going to play a Whip of Erebos of his own, a card that's fallen out of favor in these mono black decks and in Standard in general. We have one on each side of the table here. Gray Merchant off the top here for Bernal. It's actually not bad. It's going to be a drain and gain for 4, and also that Gray Merchant's going to have a lifelink. However, if that Obsidat ever comes in, Bernal's in some serious trouble.
Yes. And he can also whip back his Sky Knight this turn and detain it for a turn. The whip in this deck is really powerful.
So let's see what happens here. See Detention Sphere there in Wen's hand. Still doesn't have the land for the Obsidat. Does have a lot of options, though, because he can, as you mentioned, whip the Sky Knight to detain the Gray Merchant. He could just cast a D-Sphere on either the whip or the Merchant and keep getting in damage. He's got another spell that he can cast in his hand. He's actually got some options here.
Yeah, no shortage of things to do, that's for sure.
Again, a really strange deck on paper this one is. But you can see how it kind of plays. Here's a Sky Knight from the grip to take care of that and get in here for 4. There's a lot more play to it than you would think.
Yeah, you can also, you can whip back your Necromancer, sack it to the Aristocrat, get a token.
Ooh, baby.
Yeah, I mean, there's
there's
a lot of angles.
I might give this one a try on the old Magic Online.
Oh, it is a hoot.
There's another Sky Knight off the top.
Now, Joe does have a Mutavault that he can block and trade with, so but these Sky Knights, just detaining the Gray Merchant here gives him so much flexibility with just being able to develop his board how he wants to, not having to worry about getting hit by the whip on the way back, a whipped Merchant on the way back.
Yeah. Now you're going to see attack here as the detain from the Sky Knight that comes back from the graveyard. Joe's going to have to activate his Mutavault. He's going to want to get in front of the Cartel Aristocrat, I believe. Because if he gets in front of the Soldier, then you just sacrifice it. It doesn't gain any life, and it's a lethal attack, so you're going to have to put it in front of the Cartel. We'll see if Bernie does see that play. If he sacrifices the Soldier to the Aristocrat, it's an attack for 3, 6, 7, 8.
It's a little risky here because, for all Joe's still got a card in his hand. It could be a removal spell.
Absolutely.
So
he could definitely be trying to reel him in. Okay, looks like he blocked. Looks like he blocked the aristocrat. Okay. Looked like he pointed at the soldier, but
Yeah.
of course because Mutavault is colorless, he's good to go on that front. Bernal goes down to 1 when at 26. Of course, the Grey Merchant cannot attack because it was detained. It can block now this turn, but as we do know, just like you guys do at home, there's another Skynet hanging out there, and there's a land off the top to cast Obsidat. So Bernal at a precarious 1. There's an Obsidat put on the stack, and that's going to be it. So Bernie Wynn, with Esper Humans, is up a game here against the 77th ranked player on our leaderboard, Joe Bernal. Both these players sitting at 5-0. Esper Humans, interesting little deck.
So I played against this deck a couple times online. The things I like about it, I think it's an excellent deck for Whip of Erebos.
Okay.
Because you have a lot of the same powerful grindy cards to get back, like the Mono Black Devotion deck has. You also have just random little beaters and Zathro Necromancer that's also powerful to recur with Whip. So unlike, you see Joe, for example, in that game, the Mono Black deck doesn't play a lot of creatures. A lot of the removal in the format exiles. He never really got to do anything with his Whip. The Esper Human deck, the Whip always has a ton of stuff in the graveyard to be utilizing.
Yeah.
And again, it also gets to wear out opponent's removal and be able to land Obsidat. Obsidat is also really good with the Whip.
Of course, the Omondo combo.
That's a Mondo combo. So there's a lot of weirdness going on in the deck list. You see Daring Skyjack alongside 5-mana creatures.
Yeah.
And it raises some alarms, clearly. But there's a lot of sweet interactions going on in the list.
Well, I think I don't think that stigma is the right word. It's kind of is the right word, excuse me. But it's kind of an interesting thing that we do as Magic players, right? Where when I was looking at the coverage of this tournament, and I saw that the player who played this deck at the Japanese Grand Prix, he was like 12-0 or 13-0. Like, he hadn't lost in the Swiss for a very, very long time, and then ended up losing in the elimination round to the tournament. And it's like, okay, all right, Mr. Run Good over here, having a really nice weekend with his crazy brew.
Yeah.
And it's because it looks so strange on paper. Again, 1 Imposing Sovereign, 2 Daring Skyjacks, a bunch of 3-0s. It's like, what? You just couldn't decide what to play. But you watch that deck in action, as you're seeing Bernie Wynn play right now. He's sitting at 5-0. These numbers are probably fleshed out, even though they look strange.
Yeah, the 1 and 2 mana cards were really relevant that game, and the Whip and Obsidat also had the potential to be really relevant that game as well. Joe flooded out, but if Joe had drawn more spells, then Whip of Erebos and Obsidat might have been able to carry that game home. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, if Bernie eventually draws the 5th land and is able to cast Obsidat, it probably changes and swings the pendulum of the game again. As we saw in that game, Obsidat just ends up being like the game winner, but that's the card that could have probably gotten Bernie back into the game. Something of that nature. We'll take a look at Bernal's sideboard here first, as it's going to be the more traditional of the two. 2 copies of Erebos, God of the Dead, 3 Lifebane Zombie, 3 copies of Duress, 2 Doomblade, 2 Freak Obscura, Ratchet Bomb, and 2 copies of Dark Betrayal. Erebos, I think, is too slow for this particular matchup. Again, that card is for more of the mirror match. Lifebane Zombie, however, is good in this matchup. Plenty of targets.
Plenty of white creatures.
3 copies of Duress. There aren't a ton of spells. There's a bunch of single-turn removal spells and 4 D-spheres, basically.
Yeah.
You've got 2 copies of Doomblade. There's a lot of white creatures, so I like Doomblade here. Freak Obscura, about the same. A lot of targets there. Ratchet Bomb, I think 2 is probably the sweet spot in this matchup to take care of Bernie's stuff, but it can't kill your own pack rat stuff, so you got to be a little bit careful there. And 2 copies of Dark Betrayal, which can take care of Obsidat, but not really much else.
Yeah, there's Desecration Demon, which who knows if Bernie's even keeping that in his deck in the post-board games. Yeah. There's 4 copies of Zathro Necromancer, not really the type of card you want to be bringing in removal for that doesn't exile, and so that's another benefit of these, of a deck like Esper Humans. When you're playing a deck like Boros/Orzhov, beatdown decks, or you're playing Mono Black or Mono Blue, the types of removal that's good against you is very evident to your opponent, and the post-board games often get rough because they have more surgical removal. The Esper Human decks kind of have a smattering of everything, and some removal is efficient against certain class of the deck, and that same removal is inefficient against other class of the deck. And so it's very hard, like you said, to decide whether or not you're supposed to be bringing in Doomblades and Ratchet Bombs and these removal spells that are good against half the deck but not good against the other half.
Yeah, and I know that he can certainly change things up after sideboard, too.
Yeah, he has 3 copies of Thoughtseize, 2 copies of Underworld Connections if he wants to convert into more of a be able to try to match him pound for pound and card for card. He has 1 copy of Blood Baron that I would imagine is coming in here as well. He has 2 copies of Supreme Verdict, which I'm sure are for more creature-oriented matchups, but some of the threats in the Mono Black deck are tough to handle, so he may want to keep in perhaps 1 that he has in his main deck. He has 2 copies of Negate if he wants to fight over removal spells, and bringing Negates also kind of makes some amount of sense when you're bringing in Thoughtseize and Our World Connections. Try to rebuild it as more of a control deck. He has another Last Breath, Far Away, a Glare of Heresy, some more removal he has access to. But he has a lot of different ways he can try to sculpt his deck here in the post-board games.
We should call this deck the Slap Chop. It does it all.
Does it
all?
all?
Slices, it dices. It can change into anything. It can actually change into anything at this point. It has counter spells. It's got wraths. It's got more creatures. It's got discard. It can do it all.
And that's another thing that you don't necessarily. It's hard to see when you're looking at 75 cards, but it's when you actually start playing with and against the deck, you start to tell. This deck has a really good ability to shift roles depending on the matchup.
Yes.
It can become a control, Wrathu Obsidian deck against really linear beatdown decks. It can convert into a little creature deck with Thoughtseizes to back it up. It can go really long with Underworld connections if it wants to. And so when you're looking at these deck lists, it looks like a lot of nonsense, basically. But then when you actually see it in action, part of the power is its ability to switch up gears in the post-board games depending on what it's playing against.
Again, it looks very strange on paper. I think many will admit that, but wins are wins, and this deck can do a little bit of everything. And certainly, as you mentioned, it keeps people off guard about what it can do. And I'm sure that at the Grand Prix, when this deck was being piloted, and you see your opponent play a soldier and then like a Skyjack, you're like, oh, okay, the Boros Aurora's off deck, and then a Sky Knight, and it's like, oh, so you're splashing blue, and then it's like a whip, and it's like, I don't have any idea what's going on. What's going to come next? Like an Obsidian, it's like, oh, jeez, what am I doing? How am I supposed to sideboard against this thing?
He has them all.
Yeah.
He has all the cards.
How am I supposed to sideboard against this thing?
Right.
I have no idea. What is he going to sideboard it against me? He's already demonstrated he's got a pretty wide range in his sideboard. It has a very wide range of things it can do. It's a really, really interesting deck. Nothing like we've seen before in Standard for this particular format because, again, the Standard decks in this format are so straightforward. Mono Black Devotion, okay, there's a range of cards you can have in your main deck and your sideboard. Same thing about Mono Blue Devotion and the Green-Red Monsters decks and stuff. This, you can literally, anything can happen in any game.
And, against the deck I was playing, the red-white, burn deck, it turns out that Detention Sphere plus Desecration Demon is really powerful against that deck because they can really only answer Demon with Chain of the Rock.
Sure.
So you have an answer Chain of the Rock, and the Demon just killed me.
Just sixes you a bunch, and you can't do anything about it, yeah. You see Bernal's going to take a mulligan here. Len is going to be on the draw. He'll decide if he wants to keep his 7. Bernal just with a 1-lander there, so nothing really going on. Wen is going to keep his hand. Again, both these players sitting at 5-0. Joe Bernal is your more household name. You'll see the 77 next to his name as he has 77th place in our leaderboard right now for Season 1. Of course, if you guys want more information about our leaderboard and Players Championship, Season 1 qualifications, qualifying for the invitation, all that stuff, head over to StarCityGames.com. You can go to the leaderboard, all of that good stuff. Plenty of information to be found about that in our new Players Championship at the end of this year. I see 77. Bernal's got some work to do. He's certainly off to a good start in this particular tournament. I don't know if this is a good or bad matchup for him. I think that's the really interesting part where Game 1, it looked like he was having some difficulty. But I have no idea how the things play out here for Mono Black against Esper Humans. I'm sure Bernal probably doesn't either. I can't imagine he's tested against this deck a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that, the Mono Black deck needs to be applying some sort of pressure at some point because Obsidian and Blood Baron and Whip present these inevitability challenges. But with 4 Detention Spheres, plus like random faraways and last breaths and what have you, it's just hard to muster a lot of pressure.
So Bernal's going to take a look at 6. He's got Desecration Demon, a Pack Rat. Doesn't look like he has any lands. He immediately sends that back, so he's going down to 5. As Wen maybe mentally pumping the fist right now.
To back up a little bit, why I bring up the Desecration Demon Detention Sphere thing when I was playing against this deck was you look at Desecration Demon's obviously plenty powerful on its own, shows up in Mono Black and is really good.
Yep.
Detention Sphere is plenty powerful on its own and, shows up in Blue-White and Esper and what have you. So they're not cards that you question being in someone's deck. But when I played against the deck, those 2 cards being in the same deck I felt like I couldn't win because of those 2 cards. And the opportunity cost is really low playing those 2 cards together. They're both individually really powerful, come up all the time and constructed. And that's another thing where when I was reading this deck list, that's not even something that registered as a thing.
No, not at all.
And then when I was playing against Magic Online, I had a feeling like it was really hard for me to win the games when those 2 cards got drawn. And there are plenty of, Red Devotion, Red White Burn, these decks that try to answer Desecration Demon through Chain of the Rock. And just having that angle of attack in your deck is really powerful there. And there's a lot of other weird combos and synergies in this deck that are low opportunity cost, plenty powerful on their own, but do pinpoint particular matchups.
I mean, you can just rattle off, 3 cards from this deck, right? And your immediate thought of when you hear of card, if I were to tell you the guy has Attention Sphere in his deck, you're like, okay, so Esper, blue, white, something like that, some control-based deck with Revelation. He's got Desecration Demon in his deck. It's like, okay, mono, black, I guess. He's got Soldier of the Pantheon. It's like, all right, there's a Boros, and what's going on? I'm confused. He's got Whip too. He's got all these cards that are individually powerful, but oddly enough, they do kind of work kind of well together, which is again, it's a strange combination. As Bernal's going to keep his 5 cards, play a Swamp and pass, Temple of Silence here from Wind, going to put the top card on the bottom. See if Bernal has maybe like a Pack Rat to try to steal this one, but all he has is a Ratchet Bomb.
And I think Bernie's hand has multiple Zathra Necromancers, very powerful against decks that are trying to play just a bunch of removal.
There's another Temple of Silence. So Wynn is off to a much slower start this game than he was in the previous one. And you did mention the multiple copies of Zathra Necromancer in the grip for Wynn, a card that's fantastic against Mono Black. And another card, and we talk about this, a lot of cards just kind of just fall underneath the radar of not seeing a ton of play. Even though they're powerful, no one can really deny that. Zathra Necromancer is obviously one of those cards.
Yep.
And now it's kind of coming back from the white-black Orzhov aggro deck that we saw Ben Stark, I think the top 4 of Dallas with, and some people playing. And now we see it here in this particular deck as it's going to get deployed right now.
Yeah, Zathra Necromancer is a black card that's asking you to play with a lot of cheap humans.
Yeah.
Not a lot of decks can check off all those boxes, but Necromancer is clearly plenty powerful once you have the right infrastructure for it.
It does a lot of things well, and one of the things that it does well is keep the card that Bernal just played in check in Desecration Demon. It always gives you fuel for the fire to be able to take care of that card. Here is a Thoughtseize is going to take care of Gray Merchant. Swamp is the last card in Bernal's hand, so Wen knows what he needs to beat right now.
Yeah.
And of course, anything can come off the top of the deck for Bernal, but right now he knows, all right, I have to deal with this Desecration Demon. There is, in a way, I didn't see that coming, attack for 2.
Yeah, there's one of those in the main and one of those in the board.
Sure, why not? That card's super powerful. Get one of those in there. Yeah. I promise your opponent won't play around it.
Yep. Joe drew possibly the best draw step that he has right now.
Yeah, I would argue it is. Yep. Now, it's tough because he wants to, he needs to kill that. Token's going to come into play, and now he gets to deploy his connections. So we'll get a zombie token out there. Sam Black is in the house. And now we're going to activate this and draw a card. And he's going to play his land. And of course, the reason that he plays that and activates it now is because instead of waiting until Wen's turn, because if he draws a Scry land, he wants to put that in play and manipulate his draw step. Also, that land's going to come in and play tapped. Wen is going to play a God of the Shrine, get in there with Sam Black. One thing you'll notice right now, Patrick, is no blue mana over there on Bernie's side.
And the mana in this deck, granted, is not great.
Yeah. It is a 3-color deck after all.
And it's pretty sensitive to having a bunch of different colors early.
And Joe going to take another draw step with the Connections. Connections going to dig him out of this hole that he's in from this mulligan. That's a start. Pack Rat is in the house.
One of the better draws that Joe has at this point. Connections plus Pack Rat means, doesn't kind of doesn't matter what you're drawing.
Yeah. He can come back. Desecration Demon trigger is going to go on the stack. Joe says that's fine. Attack you for 6, 7, 8 is what Wen's going to do. He's going to put Bernal down to 6. And he can't afford to sacrifice anything right now. His follow-up is another Desecration Demon. Going to make a Pack Rat here. You can see the power of that 6/6 flyer. And Joe is between a rock and a hard place right now.
And Bernie's still without blue if he finds blue, then all hell may break loose.
Yep. And he's got a Sky Knight in his hand. Not sure the other blue cards that he does have.
I think the last card in his hand actually may have been Whip of Erebos.
Okay. Let's see what Bernal wants to do, because right now he's sitting at 6. He's facing 2 demons. I think he's priced into having to draw a card here.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't change the demons from being lethal. They're already lethal, so.
I mean, Gray Merchant wouldn't be so bad. He drew a Whip of Erebos, and it has a demon of his own right now. Demon is, it doesn't do too much. It's not the worst draw in the world, but it's not great either. The Whip is just okay.
Yeah, he's just kind of short on resources right now. The mulligan to 5 is really coming back to haunt him.
All right, 4 mana. Deso Demon's going to join the party. Going to pass the turn back, I believe. And as you mentioned, yeah, if Wen does draw a blue source, it's probably lights out. But again, he's in that position where he's pretty happy drawing a land because the chances are it's going to be a blue one. I think that's a Hallowed Fountain right off the top, or a spell.
Yeah. Hard for him to miss too bad. It's just other blue cards.
Yep, and my eyes do not deceive me. That is a Hallowed Fountain, so one's going to go down to 16. He's going to tap 3 mana. Eo Skynet is going to come into play. Trigger Detain, target your Desecration Demon. A Desecration Demon can sacrifice itself to take down one demon. Pack Rat can sacrifice, take down the other one. Whip of Erebos says none of this matters. Joe Bernal is going to pack it up, pack it in. Bernie win. Esper Humans moves on to 6-0. Some unfortunate draws there from Bernal, but at the end of the day, I think the real story here is that this Esper Humans deck sitting at 6-0 right now, maybe a little bit better than people think.
Yeah, and I think the way that this deck uses Whip of Erebos is really a great sort of story or